So here I am, Ludwig Fischer, talking about the larger context of the group at Monteverita between 1900 and 1925. The choice that they made was to look at what the percentage choices by the society were, and if there wasn't another one. Now, there are those people who choose the heroic path. These are people who are so deeply connected to spirit and to soul that when the society is on the wrong track, they sacrifice their own life. Even if they had the opportunity, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, to be on a lecture tour in New York City and go back at the very end of World War II to Germany to be killed. But he was listening to a deeper truth that was more important than his physical safety. So we have those heroes, actually. We have them as martyrs in every religion. And in regard to a specific ideology or way of living. So this heroic self-sacrifice, now, do you have it in you? The second choice is, I let you think and guess about these four choices, which ones you think percentage-wise apply to people when you look at the general population. The second choice is the opportunistic adjustments, which eventually actually is a soul betrayal. You run with a pack, and you might even get a pretty high position. You might be becoming a high-ranking official in that new way of, advertised ideology. So I think most people, and many people actually, do not have a choice. Out of fear, lack of courage, bonds that they have with other people, they need simply to say, now it's time to be a fascist. Now it's time to be a communist, a monarchist, a whatever it might be. So, but what happens if this great ideology suddenly produces a disaster? Well, then I just see how quickly I can adjust to the next ideology, the right way of living. So, are you innocent then? Well, I wasn't really a fascist. So, but there comes the whole issue of that collective guilt. Now, this third opportunity is an interesting one because it kind of seems to be somewhat safe. And there's a name for it. It's called the inner exile. So secretly, you do know that guy at the top is a complete idiot. He's violent and he's going to get everybody into deep trouble. But you don't talk about it. You secretly dissent. And as a public persona, use fake agreement. There's a wonderful film called Mephisto with Klaus Maria Brandauer, and it's basically about Gustav Gründgens. So there were a number of artists that made the arrangements with the ruling ideology in that Third Reich, which did not last than 1,000 years, but certainly caused great catastrophes in those 12 years. So, the fourth option that everybody needs to decide for themselves is, I'm out of here. I completely remove myself from the society. I disagree what's going on, and I can be who I am, and I go into an outer exile. So there's no hope for improvement. You still can have a great career. You may use your talents in Hollywood. If you look at people like how many Germans were Fritz Lang, Ernst Lubitsch, Billy Wilder, Wilhelm Wildermann was his name originally, right? So you can blossom in another place, but then you betrayed your fatherland and those who were part of your group or even your family. Now, what is more important here? That betrayal. We've been talking about Hermann Hesse, and Hermann Hesse, in a way you could say, he betrayed his wife and his children. At one point he felt that he had literary works, he had callings of speaking an inner truth that were more important than taking care of his kids. Do we accept that, forgive him, accuse him? He was heavily accused after World War II of being in Switzerland, in this very nice area where you are now, while other people were bleeding to death at the front, dying for their fatherland, which is of course a bit of a characterization that doesn't quite apply to Hermann Hesse, because he actually was a Swiss citizen long before Hitler got into power. So this is, I think, is a very important choice, because it comes in more subtle variations into everyone's life. And then, of course, it is very important not to remain naive. You know, there is Sinclair Lewis and I think it was Louis Neiser. They went into on a tour, I think, somewhere in the U.S. It's something I don't quite remember at the moment. I said, it cannot happen here. And the other one said, yes, it could happen here. It could happen very soon. So, thankfully, there are places and people who preserved and cultivated a way of being in this world, who were determined not only to protest and maybe lose their life, not only to adjust or seemingly adjust or just to leave, but they did remember a way of life, and they were clear about what was lost in a society that for them went in the wrong direction. So, neither denial nor avoiding, but approach a personal, not a collective, but within a small group, a way drawing from deeper wells of understanding. Now, these were the people at Monte Verita. And I think it's phenomenal that Ralph White, in his different esoteric quests, actually has been with the people that went on these journeys. It's like an archaeology of sanity, actually, I call it. Preservation of that inner realm, inner esoteric in the original sense of the word. And in a way, I feel that Ralph and his group, they visited a number of previous Monte Veritas, plural, that were before Monte Verita. It was and it is possible to seek them and find them. So what ended in a direct manifestational, factual form. In 1925, it actually pretty soon blossomed again in different places. In 1940, for example, Edmund Seekers founding his Rancho La Puerta health resort. And then, actually, even earlier, the spirit of Monte Verita somehow flew across the Atlantic all the way to the west coast to Southern California. I will talk about that at another time. Where visionaries like Arnold Ehret and his people around him celebrated a natural way of life, celebrating the arts and celebrating an alternative lifestyle. There's a wonderful book by Gordon Kennedy. It's called Children of the Sun. So there is a lineage of this wisdom tradition as an actual life experience, as well as a practical philosophy. I feel that Esalen should be mentioned here. South of Big Sur on the California coast, I think it can be considered an heir to much of the Monte Verita impulse. So can Findhorn in Scotland and other reform and back to nature movements as we had them in the 1960s. I visited these places I just mentioned, took seminars there, who have been enormously not just inspirational, but useful, facing some of the more restrictive limitations that I had faced during my academic responsibilities. Of course, here other people at this conference will talk about the Eranos conferences, about the influences of thinkers like Carl Gustav Jung. So you will experience these related thinkers in other lectures. There were also dialogues, very important dialogues, between science and spirituality. That is another big separation that took place of an either or. I found a wonderful article, I will talk about it other time, by Werner Heisenberg, about Goethean science. And of course you will talk a lot about Rudolf Steiner once you get to Dorna. But I'm thinking also of David Bohm and his dialogues with Krishnamurti. So there are things that have been ways of thinking, ways of living that are always sacrificed. Or I would say, it's just actually an unfortunate word, sacrifice. Because it actually means sacris facere, it means to make sacred. So should really always be used, I should use the word victimized. Something is victimized is excluded, devalued. So I think this is a very important issue today, that of science and spirituality, the meeting between these two worldviews. And of course I'm thinking here of the great works of Fritjof Capra, and I'm thinking here of a place that I recommend. It's a little medieval village of Pari, P-R-A-R-I, near Siena in Italy, where the widow of David Peat is organizing a series of workshops, seminars, residential, where scientists and people who are worldviews that contain also a spiritual component meet. Now, also very helpful in order to get out of that very seductive and hardly very difficult to identify ideology that we have today. Because you get it inducted and produce a worldview that you never knew it wasn't actually yours. It was imposed upon you. A media fast, I think, is very hopeful. And abstinence from the addictive mental drugs delivered by today's search engines. If you abstain, it might lead you to a seeking of more profound sources of genuine knowledge. An opportunity to look behind the attractive curtain with which AI veils and blurs your primary direct perceptions and therefore presence in your life, and the evocation of the deeper sources of memory that reside within you. So the search engine that produces something for you, is it really superior to your seeking, searching versus seeking? That's something I believe. And how much do you use the direct seeking versus the external given knowledge?